Okay. It is 6 o'clock on the dot, and I will call this meeting of the Lunenburg Town Council to order. Before we begin, I'd like to acknowledge that we're in Mi'kma'ki, the ancestral and unceded territory of the Mi'kmaq people. First order of business is a motion to approve the agenda, and so I would look to council for a motion to approve the agenda. Moved by Councilor Birtles, seconded by Councilor Mosier. Any additions or deletions? Councilor Sanford?
I would just like to add for 9C
Yes.
that the PAC hosting an additional public information meeting.
Yes, thank you. That was a late breaking item. Can we assume that council has unanimous consent to include that in the agenda? Okay. And before we begin, given that it is quite a meaty agenda tonight and we may go over time, I'll look for council's unanimous consent to finish out the agenda tonight, even if we go past 9 o'clock. Okay. With that motion, it's been moved and seconded. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion is carried. Next is the approval of our May 11th meeting minutes. Can I get a motion to approve those? Moved by Councilor Duggan, seconded by the Deputy Mayor. Any errors or omissions to note? Seeing none, all those in favor? Opposed? Motion is carried. All right, we have a series of public hearings and presentations tonight. We begin with a public hearing on the land use bylaw amendment to allow existing residential use in the marine industrial zone. I will turn the floor over to the planner to explain the process.
I'm just going to try to share my screen here. Just hang on. You can't see it yet, can you? Okay. Just hang on. It helps when you hit the right button. There. Good? Yeah, okay. So this is a public hearing for 200, 268, and 272 Montague Street. These are existing residential uses in the marine industrial zone. So this is properly before council, your public hearing. It was advertised twice, May 5th and May 12th, and we've sent the notification letters. So it's a combined ad for all three of the items on the agenda tonight. The process, it followed the public participation program under the Planning Advisory Committee. Council gave first reading and sent it to a public hearing, and it's before you today. I just wanted to note that council can move to second reading this evening, or you don't have to do this. You can defer to the next meeting if you need additional time to consider more information. So let's start. And if anybody's having trouble getting in, here is our deputy clerk's phone number. You can text her. Okay, so it's going to follow the same outline as a public information meeting. I'm going to do a presentation. If the applicants wish to have a few words, that's fine. I haven't received any written submissions. And then there's also an opportunity for oral submission. So how we do this with Zoom is you put your hand up and Heather McCollum will see your hand and bring you over and you can speak. We have had a little difficulty with the chat function and getting off, off topic, and it does form part of the public record, and we're not able to monitor it, and you're asking a question to someone and they're not able to see that. So we're going to ask you to put your hand up and you'll be able to speak. The written submissions are really any letters or emails that come in under the heading of public hearing to the planning email. So this is a joint application by the Barclays, the Rosses, and Marilyn Hebb and her family. And it's to add their properties to the marine industrial zone. It's in industrial designation. And sorry, that should be, the zone is marine industrial, and the surrounding uses are marine industrial, residential, and commercial. These properties are within the Heritage Conservation District. So these are the properties and photos of the properties. And they're under our current MPS, municipal planning strategy. So what that's saying is that there, at the time of our current documents, there was an amendment to add more properties. So these properties listed, they're residential properties, marine industrial zone, which gives them certain rights. They have property rights. They're considered conforming if they're listed. Those 3 properties that are the subject of the application are not listed, and they just wish to be listed right under 61 Tannery Road. These are the relevant policies. That's all in the staff report. When we did an analysis, there's adequate infrastructure. There's no issues because these are existing. I'm sorry, I set my phone off. So the issues are property rights. Obviously, they would like their property to be conforming, to have full property rights on the property. There is land use conflict. They are right beside the marine industrial zone. You can see marine industrial activities. However, these uses have been there a long, long time, 1800s. Traditional use on the property. This is our strategic plan. It speaks to community structure, the working waterfront, and housing as well. This is a recommendation when it went to the Planning Advisory Committee. They reviewed my staff report and presentation, and they recommended that we list these 3 properties in the marine industrial zone in our land use bylaw. It's found, so this is the motion that would be before council, should you wish to consider going forward with this, that the text be amended in the land use bylaw to under permitted development. So we're listing these 3 properties. I haven't heard from the Barclays or the other applicants, so I don't know if they wish to give a presentation. I did not receive any written submissions, and now is the time for oral submissions if someone wants to speak. Okay. That would be it.
Thank you, Dawn. So as with all public presentations, it'll be 10 minutes, up to 10 minutes of comments, followed by 5 minutes of questions by council. And I will look to Heather and the list to see if anybody is looking to speak on this matter before council.
I don't see any hands up on the attendee side at the moment, Your Worship. Thank you.
All right, just give it 5-10 more seconds. Confirm. Okay. Seeing none. We entertain a motion to close the public hearing? No?
No, Your Worship. There are 2 more items on the agenda. The next one is
Oh, sorry, I meant this public hearing. Do we do them separately or all at once?
You can do them all at once.
Okay, all right, sorry.
And the
And
next one up is for 6 Victoria Road, and that is John Hesseltine's doing this one. And he's the senior planner with Stantec.
Mm-hmm.
So I will stop sharing.
Okay, I guess I've been introduced. I will. I'll share my screen and let's see. Okay, I hope everybody's seeing my screen. So I'm here to talk about development application, a development agreement application pertaining to 6 Victoria Road in Lunenburg. The application comes from Mr. Jean Grige, who owns the property. His application is to enter into a development agreement to allow for a 3rd residential unit at 6 Victoria Road. The lot area for the property is 5,383 square feet, which is slightly below the 6,000 square foot standard in the land use bylaw. The property is designated residential. It's zoned residential. The surrounding area is quite mixed, includes industrial uses like Lunenburg Foundry, commercial uses nearby within sight. Lunenburg, I believe it's called Playground Park on the opposite side of Victoria Road. And then of course the residential neighborhood that 6 Victoria Road is a part of. It's outside the Heritage Conservation District. Dawn visited the site on April 6th, and I've subsequently been at the site on April 23rd. This picture shows 6 Victoria Road, picture that I took when I was on site on April 23rd. The policy basis for the application originates in section 5.1 of the land use bylaw, which establishes the right of council to consider development of multi-unit dwellings in accordance with municipal planning strategy policy 5.9. And MPS policy 5.9 says council shall consider development of multi-unit dwellings only by development agreement in areas designated residential in the bylaw, and provides for conversions as well as expansions and new construction. 6 Victoria Road, as I've already said, is in a residential designation. The project is an internal conversion of an existing building, which is among the options that the policy considers. The policy refers to 512, which has since been renumbered 512A, but that applies only to new construction. So our consideration focuses on policies 1991 and 1992, which apply to all development agreements. Policy 1991 focuses on infrastructure and the impact of the proposed development on infrastructure in the community. 1992 deals with details of design and compatibility. So with respect to that consideration of those policies, the application generally complies. There are no significant impacts on the town infrastructure. That would be roads, water and wastewater, stormwater, open space, and so on. The Department of Public Works was consulted with respect to impacts and provided their opinion on the matter, that there were no significant impacts. There's no expected changes to the building exterior or its appearance. The building is well buffered from neighbors by a backyard hedge, and it's relatively isolated because it is on the edge of the neighborhood of which it's a part. There are no anticipated environmental risks or concerns. The concerns identified would be that the lot is roughly 10% less than the area required under the land use bylaw, and only 1 parking space can be accommodated on the lot. So I'll have a look at the site plan in regard to those concerns. So first of all, with respect to the area of the lot, it's only marginally less than the lot requirement, and there is a reasonable amenity area on the property, roughly 20 meters squared, 220 square feet on the property for use by residents. And then, of course, on the other side of Victoria Road is the Lunenburg Park, is readily available to occupants of the building. There is only space for 1 parking space on the property, meeting the required dimensions of the bylaw. The reason relates to the installation of a wheelchair ramp, which you can see on the plan at the back of the property, and to some extent the external staircase that provides access to the basement of the property. So the next few slides show some pictures in relation to some of those features that are shown on the site plan. So on April 23rd, the hedge was in its winter state, but it is a fairly substantial hedge on the side yard of the property. There's really a small stand of trees behind the property buffering it from adjacent residential uses. That amenity area, this is viewed across the next door neighbor, the neighboring property. With the building, and across the street, this photograph shows the park that's available simply by crossing the street. Okay. And the parking space is available on the it would be the right-hand side of the building as you look at it from the frontage. And as you can see on the photograph, it is limited to that area by the external staircase that provides access to the basement, and the wheelchair ramp, which you can just see on the right-hand edge of the photograph. We have seen parking on the front of the property in front of the staircase as well, but the legal parking on the property would be in the location shown on the site plan. So with respect to the open space area and the area of the lot, we're satisfied that there is sufficient amenity area on the property, and that's augmented by the very convenient access to the park across the street. So the main issue relates to the parking space. The land use bylaw does specify that there should be a parking space for each unit, but the MPS encourages conversion to multi-unit dwellings. This section 26M in the land use bylaw is what sets the standard for 3 units, but it's essentially overruled by policy 1992 pertaining to development agreements, where it says that parking need not comply with the requirements of the land use bylaw. And then I've bolded here, the intention of council is to reduce the amount of parking required as far as reasonable in relation to the location of the property. And in that respect, the location of the property, it is on the edge of the downtown. It has easy access to the downtown via a trail. It also has access to commercial uses on Victoria Road and to grocery shopping nearby to the site. So it's a property where it's entirely reasonable for occupants to access their needs by walking, using facilities, sidewalks and trails and so on that are available very close to the property itself and extending to the locations of interest and importance to occupants of the building. So before PAC, they indicated the options available to recommend to council to enter into a development agreement to add a 3rd unit. I could also recommend application be refused if it's not consistent with the intent of the municipal planning strategy, or provide alternative direction. Recommendation is to approve the application and enter into a development agreement, which has been drafted to permit a 3rd residential unit in the property at 6 Victoria Road. So that's the conclusion of the presentation. I'd be happy to respond to any questions or comments.
Thank you, John. We will move then to the public hearing portion. Once again, our Councillor Duggan with a question. Don, the question would come after the public hearing, yes, or?
Your worship, I have Erin Ferguson of Brighton Community Planning. She represents the applicant.
Okay.
And she would have an opportunity to speak to this application, and then we would go into the submissions.
All right, well, we'll turn the floor over to Erin.
Hi, good evening, Your Worship, councillors, attendees. I did have a bit of a presentation prepared, but rather than go through similar information as Mr. Hesseltine's presentation, I just want to focus on a few points. Do I have the ability to share my screen here?
Yes, John, can you please take yours down? Thank you.
Let's see here. Nope. Why is this not working? Sorry, just one moment. Oh, I can't get my, oh, there we go. All right. Okay. Sorry about that technical glitch I was having on my end. So Mr. Greige acquired the property in 2019. And since that time, he's put in a lot of time, effort, money into renovating the property, as you can see in these photos here, both on the interior as well as the exterior. He's fully renovated 2 units, one on the main floor, which is accessible through that newly constructed ramp, and one on the top floor. And he'd like to add a 3rd unit into the basement. Although this property isn't within the heritage conservation area, you'll note that the exterior changes that he has made really do highlight the heritage features of this building, and that it really promotes the appearance and heritage character that is part of Lunenburg's image and appeal. As was previously stated, this is all, the addition of the unit is all an interior change. There's no further additions to the property. So there's really negligible impact on the surrounding neighbors. I'll go through that part here. This is just getting at the parking again. There's with infill development, it often requires trade-offs. So while this makes great use of existing community resources, existing roads and pipes, it adds more housing options through an additional rental housing unit, a newly renovated one, as well as an accessible one. And it sees new life breathed into an older building. The trade-off in this case is the parking, but given the central location of the property, as Mr. Hesseltine mentioned, it's within 10 minutes of downtown, also within 10 minutes walk of the hospital, a major employer, and really a short stroll from that cluster of recreational facilities. So we do feel that given the central location of this property and the investment and renewal that it represents, that we feel it's a very reasonable trade-off. Yeah, I won't take up any further your time. I know you have an action-packed agenda, so thank you for the opportunity to present this evening.
Thank you, Erin. All right, we will open the floor to see if any of the attendees wish to speak. And I see you, Councillor Duggan. I'll just wait until the attendees have had a chance.
Again, I don't see a hand up, although there is Susan Hewitt who had contacted us just before the meeting, and I believe this may be the one she was interested in. Let me just, Susan, if you can hear me, I'm just going to turn your microphone on.
All right. Seeing none, we'll move on to the next application, which is C, development agreement application for a 3rd residential unit at 185 Pelham Street. Sorry, Councillor Duggan, you had a question. My mistake.
That's okay. My question was that if there are 3 occupants of the building at 6 Victoria Road at any given point, if more than one person has a vehicle, what's the solution for parking for more than one vehicle?
I think Erin may be a better person to answer that question than me. I don't know that there are any alternative arrangements. Would probably be it would be the judgment of the tenant. You know, if the parking space had been taken by an existing tenant, that parking would not be available on site, and I assume they would make alternate arrangements. So again, I'll just say, I don't know if Aaron could add anything to that.
I don't really have anything further to add to that. I would note that there is I will say a functional space in front of the property right now, which is actually on city land, similar to the end of a driveway or a portion of a driveway where people park on that, which is actually city land, or where you might make a landscape improvement, which is on municipal owned land. So there is that functional space that you have probably seen in some of the earlier photos, and that's in front of the stairs there. So functionally there's two, but only one of those meets the off-street parking requirement. It is really limited just because of the size of the lot. It's a regular shape, and the fact that the city has the municipality has installed curbing quite recently to fix alignment issues along that area. So there isn't any access to the other side of the property. So that took away that parking option for a location. So yeah, there would be the two functional spaces, one secured as off street, and then the other, if there was 3 vehicles, the other one would have to go with on-street parking, which is, you know, common across the city, especially in older areas with smaller lot sizes. So.
Thank you. Any other questions from councillors? Seeing none, now we will move on to the agreement application for a third residential unit at 185 Pelham Street. Dawn.
Right, thank you, Worship. I can't remember if I mentioned there were no written submissions for the 6 Victoria either. Okay, public hearing for 185 Pelham. This is the pretty much the same application as Mr. Hesseltine presented. It's a third unit in a 2-unit building, so exact same policies, and I won't go through them again. Of course, it was advertised. It's an old town. It's surrounding uses are residential. It's within the Heritage Conservation District. It's a development agreement, so it's a contract, which allows for more flexibility over and above the zoning. And here is the subject property, and on Pelham Street between Kempt and Hobson. Photos of the property, and the proposed third unit is in the bottom of the building. You can see there's a fence behind it. There's extensive decking. I'll paint it up, and garbage. The same relevant policies, 5.9, as in the other application, which allows for multi-unit dwellings on this site, and conversions, which is adding a third unit. The implementation policies are in 19.8 and 19.9 in the staff report. And the policies 5.12A is for development agreements, and that's in the planning report as well. The infrastructure is adequate. The site is suitable for a third unit. The area meets this minimum zone standard. It has, it shows a parking area for 2 cars, but I want to note that this is not a standard parking space. And again, as Mr. Hesseltine noted, parking did not comply with the requirements. No changes are proposed right now. If changes are needed to meet code, it would have to go through a heritage review and require a certificate of appropriateness because it is in a heritage conservation district. And it would have to, you know, it would have to meet the building code. A development agreement doesn't guarantee that you'll meet code. It just allows the actual use. So building code is an entirely different issue. There, I had it there. Here is the site plan. It shows a parking area. Again, 2 spaces for off-street, but 3 units. How it meets the strategic plan through community structure, housing, and mobility, right in Old Town. It meets the intent of the municipal planning strategy, which is important to note. We had recommendations before the Planning Advisory Committee on April 12th, and PAC went with to give it a positive recommendation to move it forward to public hearing, first reading. Here is the proposed motion. Can't see it. There. Council gives second reading and approves entering into the development agreement. That's if council chooses to later this afternoon. I haven't heard from Mr. Brick, so I don't know if he's on the other side, or is he here? I don't think so. Mr. Brooks didn't present at the public information meeting. I do have a written submission, and that came from Ms. Hewitt, Susan and Brian Hewitt. I just received it, and so I'm going to read it into the public record. Again, having issue accessing the meeting today, so I'm sending my concerns with respect to the request to expand the number of rental units at 185 Pelham Street via email. We own property at 179 Pelham Street, which I believe is next door. I'm concerned about the issue of parking with expanding the number of renters. This area is also part of historic Old Town, and I would like to see it retain its charm and not become a low rent housing area. Regards, Susan. And it's signed Susan and Brian Hewitt. And Ms. Hewitt may wish to speak. I think she's on now. She may wish to speak further on this, but that's the only written submission that I have.
Thank you, Dawn. We'll afford an operative so that I don't see an applicant with us. We have the written comments of Ms. Hewitt, but we will afford her an opportunity to speak if she so wishes. And for anybody else who wishes to speak, simply raise your hand in the function for raise hand. Susan, would you like to speak? Susan, are you there?
I've given her access, but I don't hear anything.
Okay, well, we've got her comments for the public record at any rate. I see Dave has his hand up. And if people, as they comment, could just note their name and their civic address.
Yes, I'm here just in case anyone had any questions. I am listening in.
And sorry, Dave, your full name and your civic address is?
David Bricks.
Yeah.
Regarding 185 Pelham Street, my civic address is actually in Ontario.
Okay. Thank you, Dave. Any questions of council for Dave at this stage?
Oh my gosh.
All right, seeing none, one final opportunity if anybody would like to speak. Okay, seeing no further hands now, Dawn, I think it would be appropriate to have a motion to close the public hearing. All right, moved by the Deputy Mayor, seconded by Councillor Ernst. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion is carried. All right. That takes us on to a public presentation from Jeff Mercer, the Deputy Librarian for South Shore Public Libraries, regarding a request for the use of Academy Room 101. And I see Jeff is with us on the other side, Heather, so perhaps we can bring him over. Jeff, are you there?
I am. I'm just unmuting myself.
Thanks, Jeff. It's 6:35 right now, so you'll have until 6:45 to make your presentation, and then we'll have 5 minutes of questions.
Okay. Well, Mayor Risser, members of council, thank you for lending me some time on your busy agenda this evening. Just want to talk a little bit about the use of Room 101 in the Lunenburg Academy and how the library can help town council fulfill some of its mandates for quality of life in Lunenburg and in particular, the use of that room to do so. The library's role is really to serve the community, and it's not just in providing access to books and other materials, but it's also to provide spaces and resources for the citizens to pursue their own goals and to offer programs to introduce new ideas and to support public interest. And we think that the town has a similar role. The town works hard constantly to best serve the Lunenburg citizens and to keep this a great place to live. And we can help, and we really want to help. We requested this as we phrased it as a permanent use of room 101. And I just want to talk about what we really mean by that. We're not requesting that the space be made officially only library use. We really see this as a community space first and foremost, with library activities that supplement that purpose coming as a secondary priority. And we feel that doing this would be best served by giving the library full responsibility for booking and managing the room use. We also realize that the term permanent might be a little off-putting to members of council who may not want to make commitments or promises that extends beyond the current mandate. So certainly, I think a good way to think about it would be that we're requesting to oversee the use of the room on the behalf of the council until the end of mandate. That's definitely, I think, would be a helpful way to look at it. So Lunenburg's comprehensive community plan is a very concrete example of how council is always striving to improve our quality of life here. And we feel that the activities that can and have been done in room 101 through the library and through community members really fit and support that plan perfectly. And I've just got a few examples. For example, from the plan, heritage on page 118, it has a couple of spots where it's talking about heritage resources, the social fabric of where we live, the economic health here. And so how the use of this room helps is that it has access for everyone. There is wheelchair accessible. Using the library as an entry point is as barrier free as you can possibly get these days. We're open to everyone. And then the programs that we can run are both for and by people of the community, cater to their interests. It allows people to connect with each other. They can relieve some stress. They can try some new things. It allows local businesses or nonprofits to run workshops, do some training in a space that is safe and can be made private, and they can share skills with each other and their knowledge with the community. And it also is a safe space for newcomers to come and learn about the town and meet new people. And in fact, the Nova Scotia Office of Immigration has used the space and will in the future as well, I'm sure, in support of refugees and immigrants. In terms of heritage resources as well, this is a living building. It showcases the history of Lunenburg, how that history, and we show how that history fits into a current lifestyle. People can come in, they can see what this building meant to the town, how it represented the way of life, and how it has changed over the years while still maintaining this fantastic historical present. Again, on heritage in page 118, we're talking about heritage conservation, so I've touched on that. But also, the library already is an important resource for the preservation, and the availability of information about Lunenburg. So, and we see this as using this space along with council and other organizations, a natural fit to hold events that are centered on the town and about the town. We'd be very pleased to work with council to host more events like that and explore ways that we can help further the aims of the comprehensive community plan. We've noted that one of the top 2 priorities of the plan is servicing and facilities. I'm referencing page 74, and I'm talking about new spaces for art and culture. So room 101 here in the Academy has had immense use by various community groups for meetings, for recreational activities, for cultural events. So this is a space that's already serving that goal. Which means one fewer location that has to be found or built or maintained by council. In terms of culture and recreation further, page 159, there's a mention of a need and a desire for spaces for fitness, leisure, social gathering, creative expression, and more. Again, this space does that and will more. Again, it has done programs for yoga, programs for drumming, needle felting, knitting, book discussions, film screenings. We've had climate conservation activism meetings, meditation sessions, art in many different media, and much more. And again, this is driven by the community, not just the library trying to figure out what we want to do. This is about serving the community and allowing them to determine what they'd like to do and how they'd like to do it. And the flexibility of this particular space allows people to express any of those types of activities, doesn't limit what you might want to do. Again, culture and recreation 159, giving all community members access to cultural and recreational experiences. And this also relates to the goal about programming on page 172 of the comprehensive plan. Community access to culture and recreation. We provide a free of charge, inclusive, wheelchair accessible location, a public space open to everyone. And we think that by allowing this space to be part of that environment would be serving that goal very, very well. Again, culture and recreation, this time on page 161, and this is about the identity of the town. So we have a permanent space and collection dedicated to the heritage of sailing and shipbuilding, which we all know is germane to the core of Lunenburg, what it was and what it continues to be. But we've also moved ahead, and we've recently hosted workshops to highlight the Indigenous culture of the area. We have had programs about the 7 sacred teachings of the Indigenous people. This was led by a student employee of ours who is a member of the Mi'kmaq community. So that is part of that goal that we've started to explore. And we've reached out to our local First Nations communities further to work with them to better support their needs and foster more communication and improve communication and understanding of their culture. And this room would provide that safe space for anyone to come and interact and learn more about each other and foster greater understanding. Then again, on page 162 of the plan, talking about arts facilities, and we're specifically referring to protecting spaces and enabling new ones. We're definitely not an art gallery. We're not trying to get into that business. There are places around town that do that much better than us, but we do offer and would continue to do so in this space, novel art and music programs for all ages. And we do from time to time offer displays of art by local artists, giving them yet another venue to have their work out there and be seen by people. Couple other items, events and activities, page 173, looking at providing innovative and desirable events and activities and matching the needs of the public. Well, we continually engage with people to assess their needs and desires and allow them to have chances to actually put on the workshops to share their knowledge and skills and interests with other people's. So getting short on time, so I'll just conclude here, but I do have examples of community groups if you're interested in hearing about that. But really what it comes down to is this is a public space that really already works toward many of the goals and objectives of the Lunenburg Comprehensive Community Plan. The library would be pleased to handle the scheduling and oversight of that room on behalf of the council with no further investment on your part. We feel this would save the town money and would free up time for your staff to work on other priorities. And because of community demand, we already have a system in place where we can manage that booking for anyone wishing to use it. And it fits easily within our regular duties. So we're not asking for any more support in terms of our operations or anything like that. We do understand council has a commitment and a responsibility to look at all of your assets, to look for revenue to pay for town projects. And this is part of that process. And you want to make sure you're using your assets to the best public use possible. And surely if you rent this room, there will be some revenue to help support those other projects. But Lunenburg is already getting real value from this room with the current use as is. And we feel that it really fits into and works with the goals of the community plan. And we think you'll continue to realize the value of that room with holding community and recreation events, programs, and meetings, and will open up many new opportunities for the future.
Thank you, Jeff. You were right at time. We now have 5 minutes of questions from council. I will open the floor if there are questions from councilors. Going once. Going twice. All right, seeing none. We will, I assume, consider this at our next meeting. It's not on the agenda for tonight, but we will give it due consideration then. So thanks for coming in and presenting your case, Jeff. All right, that takes us on to, there is no correspondence to note, so that takes us on to business arising from the minutes. And the first item is 7A, the land use bylaw amendment to allow the existing residential use of marine industrial zone. So keeping in mind, as Ms. Sutherland said, that the decisions of council are to, this is to give it second reading. This can be deferred until the next meeting, or it can be dealt with tonight. So is it anybody's pleasure to move the draft motion as presented? Moved by the deputy mayor, seconded by Councillor Ernst. Is there any discussion or debate on the draft motion? Seeing none, all those in favor? Opposed? Councillor Halverson noting opposition? No, okay, in favor. The motion is carried. And that takes us on to B, development agreement application for a third residential unit. There is a draft motion provided. Is it anyone's pleasure to move that draft motion? Moved by Councillor Sanford, seconded by Councillor Ernst. Is there any discussion or debate on the draft motion? Seeing none, all those in favor? Opposed? Motion is carried. Takes us on to C, the development agreement application for 185 Pelham Street. Once again, there is a draft motion provided. Is it anybody's pleasure to move that motion in draft? Moved by Councillor Duggan, seconded by Councillor Birtles. Is there any discussion or debate on the draft motion? Seeing none, all those in favor? Opposed? Motion is carried. All right, that takes us on to item D. We have Sarah Enslin with us from CBCL Engineering regarding an information update report and presentation on the treatment plant project. So I will turn the floor over to Sarah.
Thank you, Your Worship. This evening, I will be giving you an update on the wastewater treatment plant project, including the current status and the next steps for all of the main aspects of this project. I will be focusing on the outfall options assessment. Our initial memo is complete, discussing and assessing the options that we considered for where the outfall could be relocated to. And it recommends 2 options to carry forward for additional design work as part of this project. 6 options were considered altogether. For each of these options, we chose locations that were in at least 2 meters of water and that were at least 100 meters away from shore to improve the dispersion and to reduce the effect at the shoreline. Option 1 is in Back Harbor. It is very shallow, so it had to be extended quite a distance in the harbor to meet those requirements. Option 2 is to extend from the existing location within the harbor, and the challenges here included crossing the shipping channel and avoiding the mooring field. Option 3 is near Burma Road, and it is near Rosebrook Lift Station and is reached using the Bay-to-Bay Trail from the existing wastewater treatment plant. Option 4 is near Highliner. It's also reached using the Bay-to-Bay Trail and some road rights of way. Option 5 is at Battery Point, and challenges here include skirting a large wetland area and protecting the outfall on the open ocean where it is not so well protected. Option 6 is at Callback Head, which is off of the golf course and routed along Tannery Road from the existing outfall. These options were discussed and evaluated in depth using a Kepner-Trego decision analysis tool. Key criteria included potential effects on commercial harbor users, risk of effect to mollusk harvesting areas, and the required significant improvement in effluent dispersion to reduce impacts to the commercial and public waterfront areas, as well as cost, complexity, and environmental impact, among other factors. Key town and CBCL staff met to develop and rank all these criteria based on importance. All of the options were evaluated, first to see if any options did not meet the minimum criteria, and then to score all the remaining options on the criteria to give an overall score per option. The 2 best scores were selected as the 2 best options. In order to inform this decision-making, we performed dispersion modeling of the Lunenburg Front Harbor and can share the results with you in an animation of the model. The colors in the animation show percent effluent in the water, where red is more than 5% effluent and purple is below 0.5%. Options with a lot of red, yellow, and green have the poorest dispersion, while options with mostly purple have the best. The existing outfall is shown in the top left-hand corner, with the extension from the existing in the top middle, and the Burma Road top right. Bottom left is Callback Head, and the bottom middle is near Highliner Plant. And the model over several tidal cycles shows this kind of movement. And so that's a clip from the model itself. The best modeled dispersion was for option 4 near Highliner. But options 3 and 6, so the top right and bottom left, also had good modeled dispersion and considerably better than the existing. The dispersion for option 2, which is the top middle extension from existing, was not significantly better than the existing location. Although there is some local improvement, the pattern in the existing inner harbor, or in the inner harbor as a whole, is really very similar. It's just slightly less impact in the very innermost part near the shore. So using the collective Kepner-Trego decision analysis tool, we selected options 3 and 4 as the preferred 2 options to carry forward for additional development. This is because they had the best scores. The bottom 2 options on this list did not meet the minimum criteria in the Kepner-Trego analysis. So the extension from existing is not recommended because the potential effects on harbor traffic is not acceptable. And also the effluent dispersion was really not very much better than the existing location. For back harbor, this option is also not recommended. One of the key reasons is that it has an open shellfish harvesting area, and felt the risk of affecting this was ruled this option out. It's also shallow and far from the ocean, so it has poor flushing. Callback Head is additionally not recommended because the construction would just be disruptive of town infrastructure. And with this option, the currents tend to push water back, or the effluent back into the inner harbor rather on a larger basis than the other options. Battery Point is also not recommended because of the environmental impact of putting the effluent in an area that's currently not, doesn't have any effluent outfalls. And it would also be the most difficult and costly to construct. I'll now give a brief update on the other aspects of this project. For the near-term updates, we have received information and quotes from suppliers for all the items in the scope. And we are now preparing designs, sketches, and a report for review by town staff. For the Project Lunenburg expansion, we have quotations from 5 different suppliers based on 3 different technologies listed here. Using the existing technology does involve the least changes to the plant as a whole, and it fits within the existing space the best. Capacity expansion can be achieved by changing the plastic media to a more efficient type and improving the DAF operation. Changing technologies to SBR or MBR would require additional tanks or additional buildings or both, but could eliminate the use of polymer in the process. We are currently preparing schematics and site layouts for all these options along with a report. More details will be provided for long and short-term upgrades as they are defined better. For the building condition assessment, we revised the report that was previously submitted for review and will be resubmitting it shortly following completion of internal review. Thank you very much for the opportunity to present this tonight. I welcome any questions.
Thank you, Sarah, for that comprehensive technical analysis. I will open the floor to council for questions on Sarah's report. Deputy Mayor.
Thanks, Your Worship. Through to Sarah. Sarah, excellent report on the outfalls. But have you, I mean, with those recommendations, do you give any consideration to what technology we may use in the sewage treatment plant? Would that have any effect on where you might pick the location?
It's true that you could probably consider areas with less effective dispersion if you increased the treatment at the plant. But there's limits to how much the treatment could improve at the plant under available technologies. And to give some perspective, the dispersion that's available at the existing location and also at the extension from that existing location is approximately half of what's available at the Burma Road and Callback Head sites. And then the dispersion once again doubles by moving out to the near Highliner location. So there are a variety of different dispersions available, and that may have an impact when we look at everything all together of whether, for example, the option 3 would be completely acceptable, even though its dispersion is not as good as the near Highliner, because the plant effluent will meet the requirements for that location. And we actually feel that there's good possibilities for plant effluent requirements that are well suited to the option 3 location as well as option 4.
Yeah, I guess I just always come back to with the DAF system. I mean, it's going to be polymer, and I think that's the crux of a lot of our issues in the harbor. For instance, the sequencing batch method, which I do believe is what Bridgewater has. I mean, they put that in a river, so I mean that that has to have that has to have a great flush, like a great tidal flush. So does that, I guess that's what I'm struggling with here, the impact of the system versus the outfall.
I think the existing outfall is in such a poor location on the shore that it's not a very good fit with even very good technology. It might be acceptable to the town in that case, but it still is a location that will always have disadvantages. And we were actually surprised to find that the extension from existing was not significantly better than the existing location. So that was one of the factors, plus the effects on harbor traffic, that we felt it was too limiting, that took that option off the table. So then the next option would be option 3, which has the next degree of dispersion available. And that would be suitable for a wide variety of plant effluents, ranging from SBR to the existing to a very good effluent from MBR. But from our analysis, we didn't feel that there was a site that we could recommend that had less dispersion than option 3.
And have you didn't hint at any costs around this, if there've been any? Is that too premature yet? I won't put you in the spot. I'll ask you if it's too premature.
We are looking at that. I think you can imagine that, for example, Battery Point would be the most costly, and then they have a range of costs up to that. And there will be more details available on costs as we proceed with this.
Okay, thanks a lot. That's good for me.
Thank you. I have Councillor Halverson.
Yes, thanks. Again, wonderful report. I just had a quick question. You mentioned the extension would be accessed through the Bay to Bay Trail. Any concern? That's obviously a highly prized recreational corridor for the town. Any concerns about running the pipe through there?
There would be some temporary disruption with any construction that's hard to avoid. And so we would like to hear the town's feedback on whether they feel they can accommodate temporary disruption. We don't have concerns about the long-term outfall being located there because it would have no effect on town use of the Bay to Bay Trail once it was installed. There's very little maintenance that needs to be done to these kind of pipelines, so that would not affect town use of the trail once it was completed, once construction was completed.
Okay, thank you.
Any further questions from council at this stage? Seeing none, I thank you, Sarah, for the presentation, and the final report will be by July the 1st, correct?
Yes, correct.
Okay, just always good to remind ourselves that we're in the middle of the process. Thank you for joining us tonight, Sarah, and we will move on. So next we have the water utility rate study and meters, potential meters upgrade proposal. And I will allow staff to speak to that. If there's anything they would like to add beyond the very useful report and discussion from the previous meeting.
Your worship, I don't think there was anything in particular. We just tried to clarify the motion and, pardon me, break it into two components as was requested.
Thank you. Is it anybody's pleasure to move the motion as presented? Moved by Councillor Sanford, seconded by Councillor Bertels. I do have one quick just clarification question. So undertake a water utility rate study based on the existing rate structure. We're certain that that doesn't mean flat rate structure, correct? That's just the overall amount to finance the utility. Ms. Dagley, could you weigh in on that?
Certainly, your worship. I mean, the initial stages of it are based on the flat rate structure.
Okay.
Yes, but it would be looking at if we continued that way or if we changed to the universal water meter.
Okay. And then we would look at presumably outside of the capital outlay, revenue neutral kind of assumptions modeling based on what it would cost to get the same amount for the rate, for a metered rate.
That is correct, yes.
Okay. I just don't want us to prove the wrong motion. Thank you.
And there are monies in the budget, your worship, to do this. So if it was approved by council, we could proceed with the consultants undertaking the report.
All right, thank you. It has been moved and seconded. Is there any discussion or debate or questions of staff at this stage? Seeing, Councillor Howison.
Thanks, Your Worship. I believe we addressed this last time, but was there an amount attached to the study? I don't recall off the top of my head.
The dollar amount for the study?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
I don't recall over the top of my head of the exact amount of the study, but there is adequate budget in the water utility to cover the cost. I believe $15,000 or less. I don't have it right at my fingertips. I'm sorry. Yeah, quite a bit less. I think it was, Mr. Dagley. Yeah.
It's fine. Just wanted a ballpark. Thank you.
And then if council decided, your worship, to go ahead with the with either application, there would be additional fees for representing the town at the hearing before the Nova Scotia Utility and Review Board and other components of the work plan.
Thank you, Ms. Renton. All right. Any further questions, discussion, debate? Just wait for Councillor Halverson to return where he's close. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion is carried unanimously. All right, that takes us on to the Fuels RFP Award. And Councillor Bertels, you're looking to declare conflict on that item. Okay, Councillor Bertels is declaring a conflict and will not participate in the discussion or voting on this motion. So the Fuels RFP Award, there is a staff report. I will offer this opportunity for staff to summarize the report briefly before we move to consideration.
And Ms. McMillan is available to do that, our purchasing and business coordinator. Thank you, Your Worship.
Yes, hi, thank you. So we, this is looking for council to award the fuel oil diesel RFQ that we completed back in February. It has been in review since in consideration for award. So this, due to the value of this RFQ being over $100,000 per year, it needs council's approval for the award. So we received 5 quotes, and we determined that Irving Oil was the lowest overall, in considering both the rack price and their markup, which can be seen in Schedule A. And while we were analyzing the results, we discovered that there is a provincial standing offer actually in place already with the province and several other municipalities. So that is available to the town for furnace oil and diesel, leaving the gasoline and the furnace maintenance to be covered under the original RFQ quote that they submitted. So you will notice that the pricing for their furnace maintenance is quite high, Irving's is. But with the savings that is estimated to be incurred with the lower fuel costs, it makes up for the the higher maintenance costs. And so yes, there is an estimated $9,700 in savings for the year, just based on our estimations, given the data and sample rack prices provided. And yes, that would be for 2 years is when they're holding those prices for. So, yeah.
Thank you, Ms. McMillan. Are there any questions of councilors on this? Seeing none, is it anybody's pleasure to move the draft motion as presented? Moved by Councillor Sanford. Is there a seconder? Seconded by Councillor Ernst. Any discussion or debate? Seeing none, all those in favor? Opposed? Councillor Halverson just confirming in favor due to the lag. Okay, in favor, the motion is carried. Councillor Birtles, you can now rejoin us. Thank you. That takes us on to committee minutes and recommendations. There are the April 29th meeting minutes from the Anti-Racism Special Committee. And there is one recommendation from the Committee of the Whole, which is to approve the annual operating budget. I think that we have discussed this one enough. So unless there are questions, I don't think staff need to summarize this for us again. And I will look to see if it's anybody's pleasure to move the first draft motion as presented. Moved by the Deputy Mayor, seconded by Councillor Birtles. Is there any discussion or debate? Seeing none, all those in favor? Opposed? Motion is carried, and for Ms. Renton, we'll note that Councillor Sanford voted in opposition. So there are the additional draft motions for council consideration now that the recommendation has been approved. I would look to see if there is a councillor willing to move those, or for the first one at the very least. Sorry, they're up there on your screen. Moved by the Deputy Mayor. Is there a seconder? Seconded by Councillor Birtles. Is there any discussion or debate on the first subsequent motion? Seeing none, all those in favor? Opposed? Motion is carried unanimously. That takes us to the final, which is the approval of the general operating budget in the listed amount. Can I get a mover for that? Moved by Councillor Birtles, seconded by the Deputy Mayor. Any discussion or debate? Seeing none. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion is carried. And budget year one is in the bank.
And your worship, just for the purpose of clarification for the minutes, those were both unanimously approved. There were no.
That was my record. If any councillor wishes to suggest voting in the negative, please speak now. Seeing none? Yep, those are both unanimous. All right, that takes us on to new business. We have with us Corporal Dan Smith from the RCMP for his first quarterly report information presentation. And we welcome Corporal Smith, and Dan, you have the floor.
Thank you, Your Worship. Good evening, Your Worship and Council members, and thank you for having me tonight. Today marks my first appearance before Council as the officer in charge of the Lunenburg RCMP detachment. I took over that role recently, just in late February. So I'm very happy to be here with you tonight and be able to present our first quarterly report to the town. And I also wanted during the presentation tonight to take some time and discuss how we police Lunenburg County, in addition to the town of Lunenburg as well. And Heather, I do believe you have the presentation I wanted to begin. Do you have the PowerPoint that I had sent, Heather? Okay. Just while that's coming up, I guess I'll just move ahead with my comments. Policing in Lunenburg County follows what's known as a district policing model. It's essentially a model of shared resources. When we use our police detachments, members, and resources in a county. In Lunenburg County, we have 3 detachments, as you're aware, which essentially operate together and take us wherever work is required. Those would be the Lunenburg detachment, the Bridgewater detachment, and of course the Chester detachment. And we use a pool of resources to police the entire county and including the town of Lunenburg. So when we look at how we execute that model, we have one staff sergeant who is the district commander. That's Staff Sergeant Paul Coglin, and he oversees operations for the entire district. As well, we have 2, we call them operations sergeants. One is based in Bridgewater and the other is based in Chester. And we also have a pool of 7 corporals. Of course, I'm one of those, and it's my responsibility to lead the operations of the Lunenburg RCMP detachment. We also have 33 constables that make up the teams that operate in the county. And of course, we have primarily 4 operational watches. Those watches are the members and the units that police Lunenburg County 24/7. In Lunenburg itself, we always maintain at least 2 RCMP members that are on duty. And they're of course responsible to respond to any calls for service that would happen in the town of Lunenburg. And if they get tied up or busy on any other matters for any reason, then we're able to redeploy the members that we have occasionally from Bridgewater and Chester to ensure the fastest service delivery that we can make. We also have 1 reserve constable, that's retired Staff Sergeant Jean-Guy Richard. Some of you may have known him from the past, and oftentimes we'll see him these days on the bicycle in either Lunenburg or Mahone Bay, and he's also quite highly skilled with our boat program, so he's quite helpful in helping get us out on the water. Between the 3 offices, we have 7 administrative staff that keep our operations running. We do also have the benefit of a crime analyst. Now, she's based over in the New Minas office, but she is responsible to cover Lunenburg County as well. And she's very helpful in terms of crime predictions and getting some analysis on crime trends that we'll see in the area. We do also have a senior safety coordinator. That position is jointly managed and paid for by the Bridgewater Police Service. And Chris Acomb, of course, helps us manage and respond to calls involving seniors, which is becoming an increasingly busy type of call for us. In addition, we also have a multitude of additional resources on request as we need them. That might include, I just threw in a few examples here, but that might include the major crime unit, the forensic identification section, of course, some very highly trained forensic officers that we have around the province. And then we can, of course, access the federal resources that we need as well, primarily based in Halifax, but that would include units like the Integrated Child Exploitation Unit on any files involving internet child matters, because that's quite a highly skilled type of investigation. Air services, and of course the critical incident program. That's quite a large group of individuals based around the province that can help us respond to any serious and unfolding type incident as it opens up for us. If you can move to the next slide, please. We also have the Southeast Traffic Services at our disposal. We'll see that group around quite a bit. That is a 6-member unit paid for by the province, and they work out of Lunenburg County. They're based in the Chester office, and they also cover traffic enforcement in Queens County as well. But we do see them quite a bit around Lunenburg County. For example, on their statistics, I had a look at those for the first quarter of this year. They wrote between the two counties 602 summary offense tickets, 144 written warnings, and also conducted 6 checkpoints. And we can move ahead. In terms of fleet, so what do we have that we're able to use in the county? We have 15 patrol cars that are stationed between the 3 offices. We have 3 patrol SUVs, and we do have 5 unmarked police vehicles. Down in the photo there, we have a brand new Rossboro police boat that we were able to secure and finally get out on the water late last season, and it's in the water now this season, which is quite a nice, sophisticated piece of equipment that's helping us to respond to matters on the water these days. We also have the benefit of having, if you see down below, 1 UTV or a side-by-side. That's Constable Canning there with it. And we're able to finally get out on the trails and begin to do some response within the county as well. So we're quite happy to have that piece of equipment, as we do occasionally need that for accessing rescues or collisions that are occurring on trails, and so on. We also have 4 patrol bicycles. That's myself and Constable Tim Lynch up there. Hopefully we're trying to get out a bit more to help increase visibility. We recognize visibility as something that we can and want to do better with. And so we're trying to use some of these tools to be able to get out and be seen and engage citizens a bit more. If we move ahead, Heather. So the next slide simply talks about our facilities. Being a district model, the Bridgewater office is where our staff sergeant or the district commander is based out of. And of course here that's currently Staff Sergeant Coughlin. And then we have, of course, the Lunenburg detachment, which operates from 8:30 until 4. At the moment, we're still using COVID restrictions. So if anyone wasn't aware, on Tuesdays and Thursdays, we remain closed, but we are always open to take calls from the public. And certainly we keep our full complement of members in the detachment to respond to any calls for service that come in. If we move ahead, with some of our specialized sections, I'll call them, we do have the general investigation section. If we're able to move ahead, Heather. Thank you so much. Our general investigation section is comprised of a single member who is currently Constable Alex Tucker, supported by the members that we have in the Street Crime Enforcement Unit. So they all work together in the same office, and together they form a highly trained multi-member investigative team. We use that team primarily to investigate any matters that become resource intensive. Generally speaking, we try to keep our operational members on the watches clear to return and respond to calls for service as they continue to come in. But every now and again, and Lunenburg, the town of Lunenburg did have one incident that we were able to engage that team in recently, and I will discuss that a bit further. But there were a series of break and enters over one evening in Lunenburg that the team came out, and those are the kind of folks that will engage for the writing of search warrants or again, resource-intensive investigations. We're also fortunate to have one school safety resource officer who's Constable Ted Bailey. He's responsible for our presence and involvement in the 18 schools that we have in Lunenburg County. But because that's a big lift, we'll often use our community policing services officers as well. In Lunenburg, itself, most of you are familiar with Constable Tim Lynch. He's often at Blue Nose Academy, and we'll see and engage him in any school-related matters that come up. It's not even just presence in the schools, but we'll use our members, our community policing members, to also respond to any reports of crimes that occur on school grounds. In addition to Constable Lynch, we also have Constable Sonia Upshaw, who is generally located in the Chester detachment, and again is responsible for community policing and programs that we offer in the community. Now, the last year has certainly upended a lot of our involvement in community programs simply because they're not happening as often anymore. Currently, Constable Upshaw has been seconded up to Halifax to work on a COVID unit, which we actually have in the RCMP. And those positions are primarily used to track and liaise with CBSA when international travelers are coming into the country. If I proceed to the next slide, and we'll just talk briefly about the first quarter calls for service that we had. In Lunenburg District, we had 2,314 calls for service, which include criminal code, CDSA, and provincial act type investigations. For the sake of brevity, I won't go through all of those statistics that are there, but a couple of interesting ones that were jumping out at us. I know we've had a lot of questions and comments from municipal units on whether our involvement in mental health matters has increased year over year. When I ran the statistics, I found they were about the same. In Lunenburg County, there were 83 for the first quarter of this year and 80 in Q1 of last year. So about the same, I would say. For Lunenburg Town, we had 184 files in the first 3 months of this year. So this would include all matters that were reported to the police, as well as any self-generated work by members simply patrolling around the town and noticing something and engaging into an investigation, whether it be traffic or any of those matters. In terms of traffic initiatives, we wrote 197 summary offense tickets within the county and 618 written warnings for the first quarter of the year. To introduce you as well on the next slide to the Street Crime Enforcement Unit. I mentioned earlier that this is the unit that works a lot with our GIS member. The SKU unit is a 3-member plainclothes investigative team that's funded by the Department of Justice, and they work with 2 RCMP members and 1 Bridgewater Police Service member. During the first quarter of this year, they were able to execute 6 criminal code search warrants. One of them was in the town of Lunenburg. They did 3 targeted vehicle stops and have charged 5 individuals. And in terms of value of what they've been able to seize, they were able to get $9,000 in property recovered that has been seized and returned. We had $4,700 in the value of drugs that have been seized as part of their investigations, and also $600 in offense-related cash that was seized during their matters. On the next slide, as I'd mentioned, there were 184 occurrences that were generated within the town of Lunenburg. What I saw as I guess the most interesting and labor-intensive files that we had were these files that are listed here on the screen. We did have one night on March 30th that kept us quite busy. We had 2 reports of break-and enters from 2 different inns that are in the town of Lunenburg. Those matters were reported later into the evening. But our break came when we had 1 report of a suspicious male that was found on a vessel docked on Blue Nose Avenue. That male was confronted by a crew member of the boat, and this fellow then fled. A citizen within the town later reported that the same individual was in the backyard of a residence in Lunenburg. And as a result of that investigation, we were able to identify and find a 39-year-old male who had been arrested and charged with numerous offenses. His matters do remain before the court. The last I checked, he had been remanded for the last month or so. But we're proceeding on those. And these files also included the execution of a search warrant to help us gather some additional evidence as well. In terms of COVID-19 enforcement on the next slide, back on February 22nd, we did have an interesting file that day when we received some information that 3 individuals had arrived in the town of Lunenburg, had stayed the night and had left the next day with no plans to self-isolate. Thankfully, we were able to intercept the vehicle rather quickly and find the occupants, and all 3 of those occupants were charged under Section 71 of the Health Protection Act for failing to self-isolate after entering the province. In terms of COVID-19 files that we've had, in Lunenburg town alone, we had 32 files related to the Quarantine Act or the Health Protection Act. So the way these matters are being administered is that if an individual enters Canada, they have to register with the Canada Border Services Agency at their point of entry. When that happens, eventually a file is filtered to the RCMP through our COVID unit in Halifax in Nova Scotia to individually check, to do an in-person check on the individual. So there's quite a few people around the county that that have been in that situation, and I've been very pleased in terms of enforcement and confirmation of checking on people. I found the vast majority of everyone is following self-isolation requirements in Lunenburg County. We've been very happy to see that. Definitely that file where we found the 3 individuals who were not residents of Lunenburg County was certainly quite the outlier. So we were happy to be able to have stick to present. If we go to the next slide, in terms of other notable calls that we had during the first quarter, we did on February 25th, there was a vehicle that had the driver had accidentally hit the gas when he meant to hit the brake and caused a bit of damage to the Irving. We did attend rather quickly and confirm that that was an accidental incident. There was certainly no indication of any impairment or any other criminal offense that had occurred in that matter. Back on March 25th, the NSLC did have a theft of 2 bottles of alcohol. Again, a rather rare incident I'm finding these days. We initiated an investigation, and on that matter, a 33-year-old female was identified and later charged with theft under $5,000 under the criminal code, and she's still set to appear in Bridgewater Provincial Court at a later date. In terms of our traffic statistics as well, we had 10 summary offense tickets and 27 written warnings that were issued to motorists within the town of Lunenburg. Those offenses were quite various. Some were speeding, some were, just one I believe was related to the use of a cell phone, and we did have a couple of suspended drivers that we were able to apprehend and take their vehicles off the road that occurred in Lunenburg. And our members were also able to conduct 8 high visibility checkpoints within the town of Lunenburg during the first quarter. Generally, we've been checking for impaired driving as well as vehicle compliance issues, which would include inspections, licensing, and motor vehicle safety issues, the general well-being of the vehicle. So we've certainly tried to be engaged within the town of Lunenburg with those matters. Hopefully I've been good for time here, but as this was my first appearance, I did want to take a moment and explain the overall concept of operations for the benefit of council. And with that, I'll certainly take any questions.
Thank you, Corporal Smith. Are there any questions for Corporal Smith? Councillor Bertels.
Thanks. I just have one question. I noticed on the weekend there was a checkpoint out by Frank Shell area, and I knew that had to do with probably COVID. Are there possibilities there's more going to be checkpoints and making sure people are staying in their communities?
I will say yes. I would say yes. There's definitely some, I would say some legal issues surrounding what it is that we're looking for. Checkpoints are generally supposed to be used for, and the Supreme Court of Canada gives us that on case law, is supposed to be used to check for vehicle compliance, impairment issues, that kind of thing. Doing checkpoints for this would be novel, but yes, it is certainly something that we're keeping an eye on. Generally, what we're finding is that the offenses that we're getting for community compliance related to COVID are found on traffic stops or some other matter that has caused us to pull them over. It might be speeding on the highway. It could be any regular thing. And as part of the investigation, we found that they're not from the community. And in those cases, I would say that would be more the situation where you would see charges laid for failing to remain in your community.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Any further questions at this stage? Seeing none, I have one, Councillor Smith. I'm just wondering, Councillor Smith, Corporal Smith, sorry, long night. I'm just wondering if you can speak to any initiatives that the RCMP is taking at this stage to tackle diversity and inclusion issues and systemic racism.
Sure, I can speak quickly about that. That's definitely evolving. That's definitely an evolving strategy that the RCMP is starting to have. And I had sent what you see before you here to Heather, just to try to have some sort of a graphic on it in the event that I was asked. The RCMP has launched something called the Equity, Diversion, and Inclusion Strategy. And that strategy is based on 4 pillars. Now, I want to point out that this is on a national level. So this is coming to all RCMP members across the country. And certainly when, I'm very limited for time in this forum, but Heather is certainly welcome to send the plan around to all council members if you're interested to read it. Generally, those 4 pillars are on leadership and governance, accountability and transparency, awareness and education, and then change, culture, and transformation. On a local level here in Lunenburg County, we're certainly all members of the RCMP are now required to take a cultural diversity and awareness course that has been delivered online simply because we can't meet in person very well. But that course has been developed and most of us have now taken that program. But in terms of what the RCMP are doing internally as well, certainly since the acknowledgement that systemic racism exists in the RCMP and has a history in the RCMP, there's been a lot of work put into reviewing workplace policies and practices. We're looking to every member that's a visible minority of the RCMP to see if there's been any career barriers or any racism ingrained issues that have prevented them from advancing or moving ahead with their careers that they want. And it's expanding certainly into, to also include our Indigenous communities. Certainly, it's a wide array of initiatives that are being undertaken in the RCMP. So certainly, this is a conversation that would be extensive and very detailed. But as I say, you're certainly welcome to have a look at the Equity, Diversion, and Inclusion Strategy kind of presentation notes that we have, and that would give you some more detailed information on what the RCMP has been doing, which is quite in depth.
Thank you, Corporal Smith.
You're welcome, sir.
Any further questions for Corporal Smith? Councillor Helgeson.
I guess I'll just follow up on your question, Your Worship. I see a lot in that present. Excuse my cat. Love meeting at home. Just follow up on your question. I see a lot in about your membership and equity and diversity and inclusion in your membership. What about in relation to police in the community? How does your EDI measures work in that capacity?
Yeah, so part of that, excuse me, includes a lot of outreach type work. Again, it's been a frustrating year. We're trying to get out with communities and trying to get out and engage, yet a lot of the offices are closed. For example, in Gold River, the band office hasn't been open now in some time on the local level here, simply due to the pandemic type situation. So I think what you're going to see, I think as time moves ahead here and some of these restrictions ease, is that we want to get out in the community. We want to engage the BIPOC community, the elder community, in Indigenous communities, and start having those conversations about how we can do better, how we can better engage members of those communities, and really have a hard look about how we're providing our policing services. I think for a lot of years, we've gone into communities with not a lot of training or engagement on perhaps what's important and some of the cultural values in these communities. And we need to have a careful look at that. So certainly on a local level, we're going to be reaching out, and we are reaching out to these communities to start having these conversations about how we can better engage and respond to the cultural norms that are in place.
Thank you, Corporal Smith. Any further questions? Seeing none, thank you, Corporal Smith, for joining us and for providing us with a very extensive report of the services you provide.
Again, thank you for having me, everyone. Have a good night.
You too. All right, that takes us on to new business item 9B, which is the deed transfer tax bylaw draft amendment, which is consequent to the budget deliberations. And there is a motion that is provided. Ms. Dagley, I don't know if you want to summarize that for council's benefit prior to consideration.
Well, I can very briefly, Your Worship. As you noted, it is part of a follow-up from our budget discussions where council indicated that they wish to increase the deed transfer tax rate that is incorporated in bylaw number 60 from the 1% to 1.5%, and that the additional 0.5% will be used in our operating budget. This is estimated to perhaps generate $80,000 in additional revenue in this fiscal year. There is a motion there with a first reading of the bylaw update for June, our next council meeting on June the 8th.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Dagley. I think that's fairly clear for councilors. Is anyone willing to move the draft motion as presented? Moved by the Deputy Mayor, seconded by Councillor Ernst. Is there any discussion or debate? Seeing none, all those in favor? Opposed, the motion is carried. All right, that takes us on to the late breaking item of an additional public information meeting at the Planning Advisory Committee level for the draft land use documents, the MPS, the LUB, subdivision bylaw and subdivision specs. There is a draft motion that's been provided by Ms. Sutherland, the planner. Ms. Sutherland, did you want to speak to this as a summary?
Thank you. This is an additional opportunity for the public to have a look at the draft planning documents and provide additional input. And if there's any changes coming as a result, Upland would be working on that and incorporating them into the draft planning documents. The draft planning documents have been uploaded to the Project Lunenburg website, so they're available now. And the email, when Upland sent the email out to their listserv for people to have a look at them. But we were just concerned that, you know, there's only one day between the latest revision, although everything was known in advance what was going to change, and the PIM. So we're going to have two PIMs, one tomorrow, and then this is for an additional one, which wasn't budgeted for the next week.
Thank you, Ms. Sutherland. So this is an addition for council's benefit to our already extensive public engagement strategy on our new land use documents, which began in February 2019 with all our Project Lunenburg engagement. And now just we're going through the official engagement process. And it was felt that an additional PIM may be necessary. So that is, the motion is there. Councillor Sanford, I'll allow you the opportunity to move it as the chair if you so wish. So it is moved by the chair of the Planning Advisory Committee. Is there a seconder? The Deputy Mayor, I believe. Is there any discussion or debate on the draft motion? Councillor Halverson?
I guess just like a little clarity on why we could not just perhaps postpone tomorrow's meeting to June 6th and just have the one meeting. Is why do we need a second?
Leave it to Ms. Sutherland to answer, but I think it's because the May 26th date was previously advertised.
Your worship, that's correct. It was
Yes.
advertised, and there are, the changes have been incorporated, so there will be changed documents from the last time the public saw them. It's from the last time they were at the Planning Advisory Committee. So public input has already gone in, and they've been updated, and this is just another opportunity for public engagement.
Okay.
Thank you.
Your worship, we'd also seek budget approval for this because it's an unbudgeted item. It's approximately $3,000, I think. It's not incorporated in the draft motion you see, but we could add that.
The $3,000 is in the draft motion, Ms. Renton. I don't know if that constitutes a budget.
Oh,
approval.
I must have an old one.
It's your worship.
Yeah, authorize up to, yep.
Up to.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. I have an older version. Thank you.
Okay. All right, it has been moved and seconded. Is there any discussion, further discussion or debate? Seeing none, all those in favor? Opposed? Motion is carried. All right, now I would like a motion to move and meet in camera subsequent to section 22(2) of the Municipal Government Act to consider the agenda items listed. Moved by Councillor Sanford, seconded by Councillor Bertels. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion is carried, and we will take a 10-minute with council's unanimous consent bio break recess prior to reconvening as council in camera. Thank you, everyone.